The second type is what we call periodic impermanence. And basically, periodic impermanence is accumulation of momentary impermanences. So it's a large chunk of small bits of moments. And it tells us that phenomena do not just fluctuate among different states, but they're actually changing from moment to moment so much that after long periods of time, nothing about them remains the same. This is similar to our example of how the body has changed. So things can change at different lengths of periods of time. So for some they take longer to change, for some they take shorter. Just like our body, it takes 7 years for all of our cells to be renewed. But for a seed to change, some seed could take only about a few days to begin to sprout. That's a change. But for some, they could take years to grow and bear fruit. Therefore, these will be different lengths of periodic impermanence. And we've talked about impermanence as the first Dharma seal. And we have to realize that understanding the first Dharma seal is important, because once we recognize the brevity or the shortness of life and the impermanence of all situations, we would actually find that motivation to dwell deeper into the truth of life, to help us realize our real purpose of being here and living in this world and interacting with all the phenomena. In other words, we're talking about impermanence, not to scare you, not to scare anybody by saying that your life is very, very short. But instead, we'll try to tell you to make the best out of your days. That's why it has been said that we need to seize the day. Make every moment count. Make every second count. That's in fact what impermanence tries to inspire us. And in the Buddhist sutras, it would also have similar verses that teaches us to remain aware of impermanence. Such as the following verse. It tells us that life shortens with the end of each day. Like fish running out of water, what joy can there be? Imagine if we were the fish. We were living in a pond where the water is slowly decreasing every day. And we know that without water, we cannot survive as fish. And if death is drawing nearer in this manner, how would we feel? And this very first verse will encourage us to live every day with this attitude, knowing that life is shortening every moment. Therefore, we need to make the best out of each day in our lives, to make sure that our life, the value of our life, is full of values, that it's worthy, every day is worthy of their meaning, and so on. And okay, we may say that life is shortening. But to you, you probably don't understand. You probably won't know. You probably ask me, how am I supposed to know that how long my life will be? And the Buddhist Sutras also answer this question. It also tells us how long life is. Once the Buddha asked his disciples, how long is life? One of his disciples said, life is as long as a human span. For example, a human can live 100 years, so that's how long our life can be. The Buddha said, no, that's not correct. And then they went through a lot of answers. And every time they try to provide with an answer with how long life is, such as life is as long as a season, life is as long as a day. The Buddha always shook his head. And then finally one disciple said to the Buddha, life is as long as a breath. So the Buddha said, yes, you got it. Why? Because we never really know when our life is going to stop. If we're going to die in the next moment, any moment that our body stops breathing, any moment that we stop taking a breath, and then we would pass away. That's how long life may be to you and all of us. Therefore, the Buddha had used this story to remind us that life is short, that we need to seize the day. He used examples of flowers, the morning dew, or the fireflies, and even sunlight to explain to us how quickly life can end, to inspire us to really, really make the best out of each of our days. And so therefore, this is a very important meaning that lies behind the first Dharma seal. impermanence. Okay, now let us look at the second truth, the second Dharma seal, which is the fact that nothing has a self-nature, or in the beginning we have said that no phenomena has a self. In other words, we need to carry on from the first Dharma seal of impermanence and say that because everything changes, therefore nothing has a sense of self. What do we mean by this? When we've talked about, or when we've discussed dependent origination, we would have realized that everything arises because of causes and conditions. Everything is obliterated because of causes and conditions too, which means once a right set of causes and conditions come together, a phenomenon will exist. But once these causes and conditions cease to exist, that phenomenon will also go away. Therefore, this demonstrates that all things depend on other things for their existence. In other words, not one of them is independent and able to exist without other beings. So nothing has any attribute that endures over long periods of time. Eventually, everything changes, and therefore nothing can be said to have a nature, much less a self-nature. Well, we've talked about this no self, and of course then the next thing we need to do is to dwell on the notion of self. What is the self? We usually think what we have is a part of ourselves. For example, what I think, what I am, how I feel, and what I have. We believe that all these are part of ourself, but Buddhism would describe such views as false impressions of the self. Because even if we are saying that we understand that we do not have a self-nature, most of the time in our lives, we still act as if we do. Why? In a way, although we are always changing in the same way as just everything else is changing, sometimes solid things seemed very important to us. For example, my body, my family, or my belongings, my possessions, all of this you will see it as a part of yourself. But when we say that it is mine, then aren't we at the same time denying the fact that they are simply a momentary accumulation of causes and conditions, and once they fall apart, they will no longer be there? So it's very, very difficult for us to break through this self when you think about things such as I am, I will, I have, or the fact that my soul is eternal. Before we try to dwell on this term of the self deeper, let's first look at the way other religions view the word self. And while Buddhism says that nothing really has a self-nature, most of the world's religions maintain the exact opposite. They tend to claim that an absolute and eternal and completely perfect God created human beings and their eternal souls. But Buddhism denies this. It denies self-nature in two ways. First of all, it tells us that there's really no self in a human being. Why? While most people are very attached to their bodies, and this attachment will lead them to believe that there is some absolute essence or nature inside of them that is the real them. But we have to realize that the body is merely a manifestation of karma. It is a delusion caused by a brief congregation of physical and mental components of existence. Just like a house will be made up of wood, concrete, windows, tables. And if you take anything apart, that makes a house incomplete. That takes away the meaning of a house. So you take anything away, and then a house no longer exists. In other words, it means that the house does not have a self-nature. It's merely a combination of all of these materials. The same goes to our body. Our body is made of bone, made of flesh, made of blood and skin. Just take this hand as an example. It's made of all of those. But if any of those was to be missing, then I would no longer have what I call a hand. Therefore, the notion of a hand is really empty. Therefore, this self of a hand is really not there. Let me try to demonstrate this with a story. Once a man was traveling in the wilderness, and because he had missed time to find accommodation, he was forced to stay in an abandoned table. Therefore, he decided to sleep underneath an altar table. And in the middle of the night, this very short ghost came in carrying a body with it. And then not long after that, a taller or bigger ghost followed and then started having a fight with a small ghost. The big ghost says, "What are you doing with my body?" And the smaller ghost says, "No, it's my body." Who says it's yours? The two started having a fight. And this scared that traveler very much because he had no intention to bump into two ghosts in the middle of the night in the wilderness. He got so scared that he started to shake, attracting the attention of the ghosts. So the ghost said to him, Come out and be our witness since you were here. Who did you see coming in with the body first?" And since the traveler thought to himself, since I'm already dead, having run into two ghosts, I may as well tell the truth. Therefore he said to them, "Well, I saw the smaller ghost coming in with the body first, therefore I should say that the body belongs to the smaller ghost." And this made the big ghost very, very angry. So he ripped off his right arm and ate it. And the smaller ghost thought, the man was trying to help me and I should try to do something for him, for his lost arm. Therefore, it ripped off the right arm of the dead body that it carried and attached it to the man's right shoulder. And so now the man has a new arm. This made the bigger ghost even more angry. So he ripped off his other arm and ate it. And then the smaller ghost did the same thing. He ripped off the remaining arm of the dead body and attached it to the traveler's body. And then the big ghost refused to give up, so he continued to rip off different parts of the man's body. And every time it did that, the smaller ghost will attach a new part to the man, until this man got a totally new body. And by then it was dawn. And so after they had all their fun, the bigger and the smaller ghost roamed out of the temple, laughing. And this left the man in a serious dilemma. He looked at his body and he says, "This was not my face, but it is a part of me now. So who am I? What is the real me? Who is the real I? Or is this really myself?" What this story is trying to demonstrate is that any part of our body that we deem so important to ourselves is in fact not the real essence of the self. And therefore we must not become too attached to these parts. Otherwise we will never be able to put things down and accept new things or new theories in this world. In other words, different parts of our body do not really represent the true self. Okay, that was the first idea of no self in a human being. And the second point tells us that no phenomena has a self-nature. Therefore, before we said that human beings have no self-nature, at least not in that physical context. And this would also mean that no phenomena has a self-nature. As we've said before, phenomena arise due to other phenomena. And when the causes and conditions that produce and uphold them are removed, all phenomena themselves will cease to be. Take a table as an example. It is made of wood. Wood comes from trees. Trees come from a seed. But this seed had to have received plenty of sunlight, air, be planted in the soil, and had enough water to grow. Therefore, each of these elements would have its original elements and so on. Therefore, without any of these elements, the table itself would not have existed. Therefore, it can be said that the table does not have a real self.